Welcome to a ride on the outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Welcome everybody to episode 107 of the MMA Outsiders. I'm Tom Albano, that's Zain Bando. Zain, just a few weeks left in our combat sports calendar for 2024. And we've got a couple of big cards left, one on the boxing end, one on the UFC end. This week, though, Zain, this weekend, it kicks everything off. It's the PFL and their big card for the year, their World Championships. Plus plenty of other stories, one in which PFL is not seen in the limelight. Not seen in a good light. One where Conor McGregor is in the limelight again, and not for a good reason. The plan was that we were just going to talk about the PFL World Championships, but I had a strange feeling that certain things were going to happen, including that story involving the Irish superstar. And, well, of course, in typical Tom Albano ETV Sports or MMA Outsiders fashion, everything gets shaken up a little bit.
Of course. I mean, it wouldn't be the history of this show if we weren't making last-minute adjustments on a whim. But given that we have a few days time until Thanksgiving at the time that this is coming out, you only have a couple of days till Thanksgiving. Given that we're in the holiday spirit, and given that we're in the mad dash to the end of the year, just holistically and in the world of sports, it's only fitting that the MMA calendar decided to have its own mad dash with the amount of news that's taking place. But before we get into that and so much more, be sure to like and subscribe to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. It would be very much appreciated if you guys did so. We're making our steady climb towards 1,000 subscribers. So every single like, share, subscribe, notification bell really does help. YouTube.com/ETP Network. And for those of you who are watching us on the video-only side, and for those of you who decide that, hey, I want to take the MMA Outsiders on the road with me, whether that's, I'm going to work, I'm in the car, I'm commuting, I'm going for a Thanksgiving holiday, who knows, maybe you're going to a tropical island that I've never heard of. You can do all that and so much more by going to all of the different podcasting platforms, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, YouTube Premium, and so much more. You can get the MMA Outsiders regular podcast. Now, well, with that out of the way, Tom, would you like to remind everyone of our sponsor, which is only going to get busier as the NBA season officially becomes priority number one starting next month?
Yes, absolutely. As I realized I put up the wrong banner, I got a little ahead of myself. And
it's okay.
Doing the playback banner. There it is. So the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, everything here from the MMA Outsiders to everything else, is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETV Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. Check the schedule on the Playback site. Again, playback.tv/ETV Network for the latest on when we're going to do some basketball games. We've slacked a little bit, but we're going to pick it back up. There's been a whole bunch of scheduling issues here at the network, but we're getting all those resolved as we're getting ready to go into season finale mode for most of the shows here at the network. But we do have one more thing we got to do, and that is, Zain, we have one more fight study we got to do with the UFC pay-per-view card next weekend.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm getting very, very sad that we're getting down to the end of the year. It'll be event number 41 on the UFC calendar, 41 out of 42, and it's not the most star-studded UFC pay-per-view on the planet. Ticket prices that would usually be within the $700 to $1,000 range are actually pretty inexpensive, given that the main event is a flyweight title fight. But we won't discriminate. I was
going to say, don't sound like Dana now. Oh, great, no, it's a flyweight title fight.
No, I'm saying we won't discriminate. We'll probably do that, and I would Hey, Tom,
Hey, wait.
this other part might be a game time decision, but we might throw in a little Ian Gary Shavkat preview, given the stakes of that.
Wait. You forget something. Since Kai Asakura is now a headliner for this card, that means we get to watch some Ryzen fights.
That's true. We get to watch some Ryzen, or as Dana would say, he used to be the Risen champion. Tom, could you imagine if Kai Asakura wins and somebody gets Dana to say he is Risen?
I was just gonna say, I know it's Christmas time and not Easter, but Kai Asakura, he is risen.
One of the greatest memes of all time, if it actually happened.
But that's UFC. We have PFL this weekend. It's their big show. It's their World Championships. Which
it's not in Washington D.C. either. Hell, it's not even in the United States.
We're going back to the Middle East. We're going back to good old Saudi Arabia for this one.
That's true. We have a lot of fights to go through.
Yeah, we have 6 World Championship fights we got to run through. So let's get into it. The main event, Brendan Loughnane is going to go for his second featherweight championship as he faces Timur Khizriev. Obviously, Zain, Brendan Loughnane has been PFL featherweight champion before. He looked to be the favorite last season, and then all of a sudden was knocked out in upset spectacular fashion, if I can speak properly, by Jesus Pinedo. The start of Jesus Pinedo's underdog run. Jesus Pinedo is actually competing on the early card, which, by the way, Zan, is going to start at 7:15 in the morning Eastern time.
Yeah, that's wild. So if you are a diehard MMA fan of diehards, you have a very early for Eddie, which obviously Tom, you will. My Friday morning is to be determined, but yeah, very early start for the first fight on the early card, if you will. But looking at this fight, though, I just think Loughnane is better everywhere. I think he's destined to do it again. I was at his fight during the regular season in Chicago, and he was already talking about, going to the championship even before the playoffs started. Like, he was that confident that he was going to get to this spot again. And to see him in this spot against a guy who's, quite dangerous and has won a couple really nice fights in a row, has beat some good competition. It's a good story, but I think that Khizriev, the only way he can win this fight is if he catches him within the first 3 rounds. And I just think overall, Lougnane's experience, having been in this championship spot before going for a second one, it's hard for me to pick against him. So I actually like him to win a unanimous decision, 49-46 across the board. What do you think?
All right. So the one thing I definitely am going to agree with you 100% on is I think this fight is going to go to a 5-round decision. I know both guys. I know Brendan Loughnane at least has finishing power, but at the same time, I think both of them are going to be tough enough to keep this going for a full 5 rounds. I could see, Zan, I don't know about you, but I could see this being a grappling battle.
Yeah, I could too. I could see it.
I know not everybody's going to be a fan of me saying that, but I honestly see this being a big grapple battle. And the thing is, Timur Khizriev, I don't think he can be doubted. He's had success, Fight Night Global, with ACV, with Bellator. He's gotten wins over the likes of Daniel Weichel. And, I mean, Zan, if you honestly look at his run for the PFL this season, he didn't face scrubs. He faced Brett Johns, Enrique Barzola, and Gabriel Braga to get here. So right. I think that's undermining 49-46 is undermining a little bit of Timur Khizriev. I think he can be dangerous. And I know that Brendan Loughnane
well, by the way, it's factoring into my hypothetical 49-46 score here. It's not just a thin air pick. I simply think that Khizriev, as the fight goes longer, his gas tank is going to deteriorate, and I think he's going to be so focused on getting him out of there within the first 10 minutes that he's going to forget that it's a 5-round fight. I hope that's not the case.
The problem I have with that is Khizriev has gone to a decision 13 out of his 17 wins. Now, the one thing I will give you on that, only one of those fights has been a 5-round fight.
That's partially part of my argument as well.
So what I could honestly see happening is I could see Khizriev taking at least two of the first 3 rounds, and then his gas tank is ultimately going to determine if his gas tank and his grappling skills are ultimately going to determine if he's going to win one more round to win the judges' scorecards.
Okay, so now that we're on the same wavelength, are you picking Wagning to?
No, I'm going to go with Khizriev 48-47.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Okay.
I think I'm going to go Khizriev, but like you, I'm not. But unlike you, I agree with you on the decision, but I disagree with you on the winner, and I disagree with you on the. I know 4 rounds to 1 isn't exactly wide when you given
no, it's
5-0-4-1-3-2, but I see this being a much closer battle. Even if Lognin does get his hand raised, I see the judges' scorecards being much closer.
Okay.
All right. I know we're spending only a little bit on each, but we've got like 6 fights that we got to get to, and we have more news stories to get to afterwards.
That's true.
Co-main event, women's flyweight title on the line. Dakota Ditcheva taking on Taylor Santos. Ditcheva looking to become the first person in PFL to go from PFL Europe champion to PFL World champion. And Dakota Ditcheva, Zan, I mean, she had a big test in front of her in the semi, the form of Jenna Bishop, but I think she passed that test. I think she really showed she really showed her stuff.
She really did. I mean, this is, to me, besides the next fight we're gonna get into for obvious reasons. This is my second favorite fight on this main card, for the simple fact that Taylor Santos has fought the best in the world. A lot of people thought she beat Valentina Shevchenko. She's with nothing but great in the PFL so far in her run. Ditcheva, they've really built up since PFL Europe. Have they given her the best competition? I'm going to be honest with you and say no. I thought Bishop would give her a little bit of a tougher fight, but just to see the way she finished her was very, very impressive. I just think overall, this sort of comes down to competition versus competition. I think that Santos' competition is way better. I think she's going into Saudi Arabia, anticipating to derail the hype train. And I mean, how's she going to take her? I agree. She becomes the PFL champion, and I think she finds a hole in Ditcheva's game and gives Ditcheva her first loss.
I kind of like that take. However, the one thing that does concern me about the competition level, you're right. She definitely. I am one of those, Zan, who feels that Santos actually beat Valentina Shevchenko.
I think we both agree.
Yeah. However, the one thing that does concern me a bit is when you talk about competition. Ditcheva completely outclassed Jenna Bishop with a first round finish. Santos completely outclassed her opponent too, but this goes back to something that I think it was Pat and I talked about after the semifinals. I'm not sure if you were on that show. I think it was Pat and I. Liz Carmouche just did not look good at all. And it feels like Liz Carmouche, I want to be very respectful. She is definitely a veteran of the sport and has done some tremendous things, has had accomplishments. I mean, I think she's still technically the Bellator champion at flyweight.
Yeah, she is.
So, but it's getting to the point where it's like, I think back to the conversation Pat and I had, and it's like, maybe Carmouche only has 1 or 2 more fights in her left before ultimately she's probably gonna hang it up.
And if you think about it too, from a Santos perspective, this is a crossroads fight, because if she loses this one, realistically, where does she go from here? I don't really know.
I mean, I could totally see if the PFL brings women's flyweight back for 25, and I don't see why they don't. I could see Santos competing again.
That's true. I mean, unless she wanted to test the waters in Bellator, I'm sure she could do pretty well.
Well, we'll have a conversation about Bellator a little bit later. You will have a conversation about Bellator a little bit later.
Yes, I will.
That being said, that's why, Zan, once again, I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to go with Dakota Ditcheva. I feel like I know Taylor Santos or Liz Carmouche were going to be a stronger test than Jenna Bishop, but I think she did have a strong test in front of her. And I think Ditcheva passed with flying colors, and I'm going to go with youth, and I'm going to go with upward momentum, and I'm going to say Ditcheva gets the win here. I'm going to give Santos respect, but I see late second, early third round finish.
Okay, I think Santos takes this one the distance, but it'll be it'll be one of those fights where if it does go the distance, it will be a hotly debated decision. If it
Oh yeah.
if it does, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go to your favorite fight on the card.
I mean, I would hope I would hope I would hope we would have a similar consensus on this fight, but let me see. Wait,
Well,
let me
let's
see.
talk about it. It's
Let me see
Impa
what you have first.
Kasaganai. It's Impa Kasaganai going for his second straight light heavyweight championship. Although he's got a dangerous test in front of him
He
in the
really,
form of
does.
Dovletzan Yagshimuradov. Oh, I can't believe I pronounced that easy.
You did. It's 100% correct. Yeah, you get it right.
So I think I know where you're leaning with this one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tougher fight than what people think. I actually like Impa to win by TKO in the fourth round. I think this is going to be a slugfest. This is going to be the toughest fight he's had so far in his PFL career. He's going to have to dig really deep to win this fight, I think.
Yeah, it's gonna be really tough because Yagshimuradov is the kind of guy who is willing to take things to the next level. He is probably going to be very tough for him. He's got kickboxing skills, he's got karate skills, and he is able to drag things out.
He's beat some solid names on this run.
I was gonna say the one thing I know Impa was in the UFC, but the one thing that Yagshimuradov has is level of competition, because when you look at a couple of his losses, two of his four most recent losses are Corey Anderson, and then you have to go all the way back to 2014 for this one. It was a little unknown fighter at the time named Magomed Ankalaev, who's probably next in line for Alex Pereira.
That's pretty wild, which is something that I don't think a lot of people, unless you're a diehard or a fellow analyst, would actually even remotely remember. That's something that I forgot about until you actually just mentioned it.
So and he didn't really necessarily face slouches either. He was tested a little bit in the PFL season. He took on Jacob Nadeau, who won the championship over in PFL Europe.
Yep.
He took on
Simone.
Simone.
It's the same and is a fellow common opponent with Impa. So
correct. Took on some, and actually Nadeau troubled Impa earlier this season.
Yeah, he did.
Dovletzan actually took him out in just under 3 minutes.
Which was a wild sequence.
He beat Simone Bignon, and then he beat a former PFL champion in Rob Wilkinson in the semifinals. Which
from what I recall, you and I were both wrong on that. You and I thought that was going to be his toughest fight, and you and I thought that he had no chance, and he went out there and he put.
I don't know if I necessarily said no chance, but I thought Wilkinson was going to give him a lot tougher of a competition than we actually saw. Now that being said, Kasaganai ended up having a rematch with Josh Silveira in the semifinals, and he looked good doing so.
Yeah, he did.
I agree that this one's going to be a slugfest. I just don't know. I think I'm going to lean towards Dove.
Wow. Okay.
We're going to be 3 for 3 on disagreements right now.
Wow. All right.
I'm interested in see what you say for this next fight. The welterweight title on the line. Shamil Musayev taking on Magomed Umaladov. Umaladov has been consistently towards the top of the PFL competition, for the last few years. But he's always, one of those guys who has fallen just short. And now here he is in the finals. But he's going to be taking on Shamil Musayev,
who's big for 170 pounds.
Big for 170 pounds, and has definitely been one of these guys, and that maybe the casuals don't think about. But when you really look at what he's done, he has put together a pretty damn good body of work during his short time with the PFL thus far. Plus, he's a Wushu Sanda master.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, this is like a human chess match. Well, I will say, after seeing Umaladov up close and personal, I wasn't all that impressed with them. Granted, the Chicago PFL event I was at wasn't the greatest regular season card in the world.
No,
So
but you have to give credit where credit's due, where he knocked out Logan Storley.
That's true. And the way
knocked out a former Bellator interim champ.
And the way he knocked out Logan Storley was one of the nastiest knockouts I've seen in the PFL. So,
and then he goes and beats Murad Ramazanov twice, which is just, I mean, that's just the craziness of how the PFL season playoff structure works.
Yeah. I mean, I like Musayev because of his pressure, and I think he'll be able to dictate the pace for most of the fight. I think Umaladov will catch him early and try to feel him out a little bit, and Musayev is going to have to lose a round to like really get into the flow of the fight. But after he does that, I think Musayev has a chance to really coast.
I know, and that's the thing. I feel bad for Umaladov because the last few years, I mean, he's undefeated. He's won, he's won his regular season fights, but it's always been an injury or a visa issue that has kept him out of the playoffs. And now here he is finally reaching the finals. But I think Musayev just has too much momentum. Like you said, I think Musayev is going to catch him and Umaladov is going to have to play from behind. And I don't think he's going to be able to match match Musayev and his pressure. So, Zain, we are finally in agreement. I think Musayev goes the distance with Umaladov as well to capture the welterweight title.
We actually might be in agreement with the next one as well, so feel free to proceed.
Okay, lightweight title on the line. Brent Primus taking on Gadzi Rabadanov. Primus, obviously, is a former Bellator lightweight champion. Now, his reign, of course, maybe not the strongest when you consider the whole context and picture of Bellator lightweight championship at that time.
It's not fully his fault though.
Correct.
That's
absolutely. Thing. But he got a win over Clay Collard in the semifinals, and that's not easy.
Which I was shocked because the way Clay Collard and I wrapped up our interview, he made it seem very clear to me that he was out for destiny, and he was out to prove to everyone that he was no fluke from the last couple of years, and he just did not look like the same Clay Collard. That it opened up my eyes to me that Brent Primus might be one of the best lightweights in the world, regardless of promotion. So.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the thing to that is Gadzi Rabadanov, definitely a tough Sambo fighter. And
a tough Sambo fighter that in some respects, too, is very green. Sometimes
very green, but
sometimes you watch him and he looks great. And then there are other times you watch him and you go, wait a minute, is this guy taking one step forward and 3 steps back? Like sometimes you just don't know.
That being said, Zain, he is a Dagestani who does train who has trained under Usman Nurmagomedov
right.
And trained with Javier Mendez at the American Kickboxing Academy, and has trained with the likes of Khabib. And the one thing that I do say, the one thing that's going to go in Gadzi's favor, at least in my eyes, Zain, and it's something Khabib has famously talked about: American wrestling versus Dagestani wrestling. And I will pick Dagestani wrestling 99% of the time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty easy. How can I not pick against a Dagestani wrestler? I think it'll be a great fight. I do think that Rabadanov does enough to finish him in the third round. I think Primus wins round 1 convincingly, and I think Rabadanov figures him out, uses his wrestling, and ends up winning by a TKO from a. I'm going to go bold and say it's going to be a TKO specifically from a half guard mixed side control position where Primus won't be able to get out of it.
We're going oddly specific here.
Yeah.
Credit to you, because 11 of Gadzi's 23 victories have come by way of decision, but in the semifinals, he knocked out Michael Dufort.
Right, and the way he knocked out Michael Dufort, I thought would never happen to Michael Dufort, and it actually did. So,
but I'm going to play the safer route. However, I will be in agreement with you. I'm going to go with Gadzi, but I think it's going to be a grapple fest that goes a 5-round decision. But I think it's going to be a fairly dominant 5-round decision, like a 49-46s.
Fair enough. I can easily see that too.
All right. Going on, however, opening the card It's going to be for the PFL Heavyweight Championship. Denis Goltsov versus Oleg Popov. Zain, you know how the PFL consistently promotes Popov with his unbeaten streak, one of the longest, not the longest, within MMA. I know Denis Goltsov is also one of those guys who has been bridesmaid, never the bride. However, I mean, you've seen the way that Oleg Popov has just dominated competition within the PFL structure of this season. I really think that Denis Goltsov may not be able to be any match for the kind of wrestling that Popov has.
Yeah,
And
I don't think so either. I
and
think
I know heavyweight fans are going to throw stuff at the screen. I don't care. I'm giving you my honest opinion. I'm going Popov. It's going to be complete 5-round wrestling fest from Popov. Gets a decision and wins the heavyweight championship. I know people don't like that from heavyweights, but that's just what makes Popov different.
Oh, I think Popov wins by ground and pound, but yeah, I would have to agree with you that it's Popov's fight to lose.
So
yeah, I think the only way Goltsov wins, and you probably agree, is if he catches him with something maddening that nobody expects.
So we disagree on the top 3 fights. However, we are in agreement on the bottom 3 championship bouts.
It's maybe just for the people that are just tuning in a little later or scrubbing through, what are our picks for the 6 championship fights? That way people can easily know.
Okay, Zain going Logdane, Santos, Kasaganai, Musayev, Godzi, and Popov. I'm going Kizriev, Dicheva, Dovlitzan, Musayev, Godzi, Popov.
Okay.
That's the PFL World Championships. No pay-per-view this year.
Yeah, ESPN Plus. How about that?
ESPN Plus at 1 p.m. Eastern time for the main card. So hopefully you only miss, if you can't watch 2 things at once, hopefully you just missed the first half of the Chiefs-Raiders game. But, I mean, let's be real. It's the Chiefs and it's the Raiders. I know divisional games can get kind of crazy, but the way those 2 teams have been playing, that one should be a lackluster Black Friday game.
But everybody said that last year, and the Raiders upset the Chiefs in Kansas City. So
I know. But you know what? But you know what? Honestly, it's a better game than what we're probably gonna get on Thanksgiving with your team having to battle the dominant Lions, and then my team getting the experience of Cooper Rush versus Tommy DeVito.
Yeah, which actually might be one of that might be the highest rated backup quarterback versus backup quarterback game anybody's ever seen.
I am gonna hope the tryptophan hits me by that point and I'm asleep.
Yeah, let's hope so.
I will want to save my energy for Dolphins and Packers that night.
Yeah, that should be a great game. Although
wait a minute. This is MMA Outsiders, not Football Forecast.
That's true. That's very true.
All right. PFL Bellator actually did make one more announcement very recently. So you saw all that Road to Dubai branding in the lead up to the October 19th Battle of Giants card, and saw it on the Battle of Giants card. Well, we finally found out what it was. PFL and Bellator, PFLator, I guess we'll call it, has entered an agreement with Dubai. So the continuation of MMA promotions dealing with the Middle East. Bellator is going to hold a series of events in Dubai with the subtitle Road to Dubai. And the first one will take place January 25th, not January 11th as originally planned. And in the main event, Usman Nurmagomedov, coming off his successful title defense against Alexander Shabili in September, will be taking on the dangerous Irishman Paul Hughes.
Yeah, I'm just going to say something right off the top, and this is no disrespect to Paul Hughes whatsoever, but I feel like this is too quick of a lightweight title shot for Paul Hughes, just given that he's such a new recent signee, and I thought they build him up a little bit more. I'm a little bit baffled by this booking, especially everything that happened with the $1 million Grand Prix and how that wasn't finished under the old regime and stuff like that. I just wanted to get that off the top. Well, I'm happy for Paul Hughes. This might be one of those we pushed him a little bit too hard types of scenarios, and I worry that that's what might happen on January 25th.
I agree, but I think they've put so much, for as quick of a turnaround as this is, for as quick of a title shot as is, they built Paul Hughes up, and they want to capitalize on his momentum now, I guess. The problem, as you kind of mentioned, he's taking on one of Bellator's most dangerous fighters in Usman Nurmagomedov.
A guy who I would not be surprised to join his fellow his fellow partner, or if you will, in Umar eventually in the UFC at some point in the next few years. But for now, it's all about him defending the Bellator lightweight title.
I mean, Usman Nurmagomedov, Zain, the controversial drug test aside, Usman Nurmagomedov is up there with, Patchy Mix, and Johnny Eblin for some of Bellator's faces, honestly.
Oh, for sure, 100%. I like Usman here to win a decision, but again, Paul Hughes is dangerous. He can catch you with anything, and if Usman is not careful, we might be in for an early non-UFC fight of the year contender if the fight plays out the way I think it might play out.
Yeah, I want to give Paul Hughes some credit. I think, he's going to come out guns a-blazing, but I think Usman's wrestling. That Nurmagomedov Dagestani-style wrestling is just going to be too much here. I'm going to say Nurmagomedov wins a 5-round decision and retains the title as well.
I would agree.
And by the way, only because you mentioned his name just before.
Oh my goodness.
The greatest Joe Rogan botch in the world.
Yeah, that was when he said it. He said like 4 different names in one.
It's like he kind of gave up on the second attempt.
Right. Just like even though it wasn't Joe Rogan, just like how when Mike Tyson said, just when he said, "Who the hell is Johnny Africa?"
Oh God. All right. We're gonna do something a little special here. It's not something that we normally do, but I think I need to provide a little bit of explanation. So
it's almost like before you do that, it's almost like you're walking out of a press conference empty-handed.
Yeah. So obviously the PFL has been in the news when it comes to the stuff that's going on with Bellator. And I have my opinions about it. When the PFL stories happen, Zain, obviously we've been up front with my relationship with the PFL and the stuff that I do for them on fight nights. I'm not a direct employee to the PFL, and I can have my own thoughts as an independent contractor. However, obviously, given everything that they have given me, I do not want to rock this vote. And then we kind of agreed on that after some discussion, because I was like thinking, do I do this? Do I not? And it was actually you who said it's probably in the best interest that I do not.
Yeah, I mean my journalistic brain turned on there for a second. I'm like, yeah, like ethically and morally, this doesn't make sense. So you staying out of the way for this one, where we try to dissect it, is probably the best interest of everyone.
Yes. So for the benefit of journalistic integrity and for my colleagues over at the PFL, I will be pulling out of this one segment. I will rejoin for the next segment, which is just also has a bit of controversy to it that just doesn't involve the PFL. So producer Pat Dana is now here. He will take my place. I will share one or two thoughts afterward, but for now, for this next segment, I'm going to be the one who drops out here.
Sure. So we're gonna get right into it. So unfortunately, Bellator, I guess, and the PFL have been in the news for kind of the wrong reasons on the week of the PFL's biggest show in 2024. So let's break this down here. A few notable fighters have spoken out. Those are specifically Patricio Pitbull, Patchy Mix, Corey Anderson, Leandro Higo, and Derek Brunson. They've all spoken out about very similar things, but the one consensus that they've come to is the lack of transparency, the lack of communication, and the lack of activity in terms of where they're at, specifically in their careers, with the number of fights that they feel that he should be offered per year, which is 3. So I guess to kind of start this out a little bit, Pat, when you first saw these tweets circulating, what were your initial reactions? You and I are obviously in a group chat with a bunch of very, very like-minded people. We were all very much reacting to this in real time. I did not react to this in real time because I was waiting to come on or to state my actual piece as to what I think is really going on here, number one. But I guess to kind of start out before we really take a 10,000-foot view of this, what was your initial reaction to this? And just, as two people who have covered both promotions in some capacity for the last few years, what was your initial what were your initial thoughts on all this as this was unfolding?
Well, basically, I mean, I can't say I was too surprised. I guess I'll start off with, because I just think that, I think I've heard stuff like this in the past. I mean, we knew about the Musasi situation. We've known about some of the other situations that have went on. So this wasn't the most surprising news in general to hear. And I mean, these fighters have alluded to, a couple of these guys have alluded to trying to get fights. I know Patchy has said something about it beforehand, but now it's kind of just everyone piling on top of each other. And I mean, it just, let's be real, it just sucks. I mean, just simply, it's not good for the sport. Uh, PFL just seemingly isn't holding the amount of events they need to hold with the roster that they now have after acquiring Bellator. They said they were going to hold a certain amount of events this year. They didn't come through with that.
No,
Certain
they did
amount of
not.
title fights. They definitely didn't come through with that. And it's now led to these guys who came over in the Bellator merger, or guys like Derek Brunson who were recently purchased. It's led to them basically being put into a situation now where their careers are stalled. And in the case of like a guy like Patchy Mix, it might be all right, because you never really know with how it's going behind the scenes with him, like money wise. You could be all right because he could be making good money every time he fights. I'm pretty sure he does have a really nice contract,
Yeah,
but
he does.
and some of the older guys, the same thing. But some of the older guys don't have the time that a guy like Patchy Mix has. These guys are like Patricio and Corey Anderson are at the end of their careers. They cannot sit and wait if they're ready to fight. And that's where the real big issue here comes into play is if these guys are ready to go, how can you tell them that we're not ready for you to fight when they don't have time to wait? It's very unfair to the fighter. It's probably not in the contracts they signed. They probably signed contracts saying they would need to be offered a certain amount of fights a year, and that's not what's happening. It's just a horrible situation in general. I think it's good that the fighters are speaking out because hopefully we can get some change. But I think the PFL just needs to stop doing so much. They're doing way too much. Everyone's talking about it. PFL MENA, PFL Africa, PFL Europe. Now they're talking about PFL Australia, and like there's a bunch of others, and it's like I love the idea, but you actually need to get to the point where you can expand before you do. And they're just expanding rapidly without actually getting any growth in the process. And it's going to lead to a big crash and burn at some point if it keeps going at this pace, because MMA fans are getting fed up, and you're seeing it now. And it's a horrible situation. It's not good for the fighters. It's not good for the fans, and it creates a bad environment.
Right, and not to compare this to their fellow counterpart who's number one, but like if you look at the UFC, for example, right? Let's just, I know this is a bit of a different example, but I'm just going to use it because it works in a similar way. If you look at Dana White Contender Series, right? It's a very formatted, structured 10-week thing where they have to build the cards and they have to make sure that the talent is assembled in order to fight. And if they don't have the talent assembled in order to fight, then they push those to make sure that they still happen. To me, what the PFL seems to be doing is they're trying to put all their eggs in one basket to see if one of them hatches, and or just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks, and it's not sticking at a rate that they probably would have expected it to hit. And another issue too is, some of these guys that are on this list are champions and former champions. So if you're making your champions or your former champions or your big stars inactive, that affects the entire business. It doesn't just affect um that doesn't just affect the fighters. That affects potential prospects of, oh, our arena's interested in hosting your event. You've already had a bunch of events canceled. They already have a bunch of events already postponed in the pipeline for the end of the year. They missed on different locations. That's number one. Then you also have to factor in, the idea too. They've invested so much money in this ESPN Plus and Max deal, and they're not getting their return on their investment. That also makes their TV partners look bad. It pretty much makes everybody on an internal side, maybe besides the people that you and I deal with on a semi few week basis, if you will. It pretty much makes everybody, sort of above those people without directly mentioning them. Of course, it also kind of puts them in a tough spot. So overall, it's a very difficult situation. It's clear to me that they're simply not working with what they have. And if they were just a little bit more transparent, not just from a reporter or a media perspective, but if they were just a little bit more transparent as to what exactly was going on, just in regards to like what the future looks like, well, mine is just one town hall where it was a very, servicey interview. And this is no disrespect to the outlet who did the interview, but I feel like there could have been more that should have been done with it, and there just wasn't. If they were just a little bit more transparent, I think people would be less concerned as to what was going on. But to hear fighters publicly speak on this, to hear fighters say that they found out online that their fight wasn't going to happen, to find out that they had to halt their camp, because of other sources that weren't internal sources, like, to me, that's just wrong when you're the one actually competing. So that's the part that, to me, not just as someone who covers this, but as someone who follows the sport and has for, almost 2 decades now, that really bums me out. And I get everyone, wants to talk about, the UFC, they control the whole market, whatever the case is. You could say whatever you want about the UFC, but at the very least, from a UFC perspective, they don't sugarcoat. They don't just randomly cancel a card and no one knows that. So
yeah, and no one knows why. Like exactly, like that's the thing. It's like we'll always be transparent with the UFC, and like it'll always just be a clearer picture. Even if there is a situation, we'll know why it happened. For these, we've had multiple canceled events now, and we haven't been given a reason at all. They tried to sweep it under the rug. How crazy is that? You're a major MMA promotion. You think we're just not going to notice?
yeah, it's very strange.
Like you do, like they do understand. Like they have like millions of followers across their social media platforms. You think people aren't going to notice when you just outright cancel an event and try to sweep it under the rug? Like I'm just kidding. They're just not going to say anything about it. Oh, actually, we're going to have Nav come and do a concert at the PFL World Championships.
Which no
Oh,
one asked for, by the way.
cool. Appreciate it. Can you tell us what's going on? Like at all with anything? You have multiple fighters online speaking out. You have multiple events being canceled with no word, and you're announcing that Nav is going to perform at the World Championship. Thanks. No one cares. I promise. Like that's the issue. They're so focused on like corporate stuff, They're focused on looking good to people outside of the sport, but inside of the sport they're a mess. It's bad at this point. It's bad. They need to completely reevaluate, overhaul something. I don't know. Something needs to change.
Well, I think the simple answer, and if I had the power to do it, I would. The simple answer is, and this is something for further conversation, but I think it warrants me just saying it. Enough with the two promotion thing. You either brand yourself as the PFL or brand yourself as Bellator and be done with it. Make it as simple and as easy as possible for people to know what they're covering, when they're supposed to be covering it, who's on the card. Like, to see someone internal inside Tapology, who say publicly that they don't even know when they're building these event pages what they're supposed to do. That's a problem.
Yeah, it's a horrible look. It's a horrible look. I saw exactly what you were talking about. That's a horrible look. And no, I mean, I completely agree. And it's just gotten to the point where, like, and I want to be clear about everything I'm saying. This does not apply to the fighters. This does not apply to the PR people I've worked with. This all is about the people that make decisions, that have the money, that are at the top that I've never talked to in my life. Anyone that's worked at PFL, if you see this is not about you.
Nope.
But the people that or your bosses and their bosses or whatever, the people running the show, I think are just making horrible decisions. And I think I can't sit here and stand by anymore and just watch it happen without
No,
saying anything, because it's just like at first you try to brush it off as like, okay, they're still learning, it's still new, it's still this, it's still that. They've had time now, and it's
they've
only
been six.
gotten worse.
They've been 6 years.
It's only gotten worse, you know? I feel like it was a better product in 2018, 2019 than it is now.
It's a bold statement, but I think I could very much agree because now it just seems like churning out the same thing.
Bring me
And
back to the days when Ray Cooper was fighting Magomed Karamov and Chris Curtis in the same night. You know, bring me back to those days. That was sick and that was different. And that's what I like to watch.
I agree,
What happens now is like, don't get me wrong, they still have some cool fights, but it's just not the same, you know. It's not
like
why I started watching PFL in the first
no,
place.
100%. I think the reason why I started watching it and the reason why I decided to attend Kay Larrison's professional debut was the intrigue of seeing a different form of MMA. And I feel like even though that different form is still there, they're just doing things in ways where you just wouldn't think were possible, but are happening somehow, some way. I as before we conclude the segment and bring Tom back in. I mean, obviously, the fighters that we have here listed on this thing are some pretty important names and are some names that, I guess you could say with full confidence, at least most of them, I would say, out of the fighters that are listed, I would say four of them, four of them that are listed, I would say maybe even three of them, I would say are potential needle movers in either promotion, whether it's Bellator or PFL. So when you have at least 3 to 4 guys, was speaking out on this. I guess to kind of wrap this up, what does this mean for the guys who are speaking out? And I guess number two, given that we're on the heels of their biggest event of the year, they're already focused on 2025. What they want to do. I mean, as two outsiders here, literally, like what do you think is the best course of action for guys like this? Some of them have been in the UFC, others of them have never been in the UFC before. Some of them, maybe relegated to the regional scene, which is just unfair. What do you think is the best course of action for all of these guys? Not just these guys, but the people who haven't spoken out that maybe are feeling some of the similar things that they're feeling.
I have no idea. I have no idea what the best course of action would be. I mean, obviously, if some of them have the option to and they can leave the promotion, I think it might be the better option for some of them. But all of them don't have that ability, and for some of them, it just might not be the best option. So I just feel like I just would rather that doesn't happen. I'd rather something changes at PFL and things are ran differently or looked at differently. Like you just can't not have a number 2 promotion, you know? Because without PFL and MMA and one championship now, I mean, I guess they secured their investors, but they barely do MMA anymore, you know? They're
Yeah,
barely even MMA.
they do Muay Thai fights now.
Yeah, they do Muay Thai and kickboxing. They barely even do MMA. So it's like when you had number 2 and 3s like Bellator and PFL or whatever, and then those get wrapped up, it's like what happens now? You know, one championship isn't doing any MMA. PFL is looking like it's going downhill. They ate Bellator with them. It's like what happens for all these fighters? Does the UFC just somehow upgrade its roster size? They can't really put on more events than they do already, you
No,
know?
they can't.
And the cards really can't be much bigger than they are already.
No.
Their roster size now is I'd say pretty damn close to capacity, no? Like
I would say so.
there's a reason the fighters are constantly going in and out, you know? Because they're so close to capacity, they can't hold over a certain amount of fighters on the roster at a time.
All right, I'm gonna step in here. I'm gonna share my quick thoughts before that you drop back out and Zain and I finish up. All right, here based on the things that I can say. Number one, in response to something Zain said earlier, if you want my personal opinion, this is not the opinion. I have no inside information about this from any bosses or anything. In my personal opinion, I think it might be, and we kind of talked about it when the PFL Bellator purchase happened a year or so ago. I think it's maybe only going to be a matter of time before all the Bellator stuff does go away and all the Bellator fighters are integrated, or a certain amount of Bellator fighters are integrated into the PFL roster. And going to what you were just saying, and this is why I jumped in here, Pat, because you talk about the PFL Champions model, Champions League model, and maybe they're trying to do too much or whatnot. What you just said about the UFC, that's why I'm thinking, granted the UFC has ties to feeder promotions like the LFA and Titan FC, but this model would be great for the UFC so that way they're not cutting so many fighters. Have a regional based UFC in Europe. Have a regional based UFC in Australia and Asia.
I guess to counter you, don't they already do that with DWCS and Road to UFC and all that way they could do more of those types, more of those.
I agree, but I think, Zan, what Pat was going to is what the UFC is getting attacked for, part of the lawsuit and everything, is that, all we need to do is just sign these guys off of those shows. They fight for 4 or 5 fights, and then all of a sudden they go, and it's just constant turnover, which isn't a good look for UFC either.
Right. Okay.
When we're what were you going to say, Pat?
It's just a tough situation in general. There needs to be other top promotions
Right,
that are sustaining fighters' careers.
Right, and it goes to what you're saying, because it's ironic we're talking about this when I mentioned last week, everyone is crappy on PFL, but then there's one championship who 6 years ago, you talk about 6 years ago, one championship was trying to promote itself as the number 2 with the signing of Eddie Alvarez and Demetrius Johnson and Misha Tate, having Vitor Belfort behind the scene. And all of a sudden, maybe part their fault, part COVID, but it just completely crapped out. And like you said,
who are some of the biggest stars from one championship? I'll name 3 real quick. Mikey Musumeci, signed to UFC. Reiner de Ritter, signed to UFC. Anatoly Malikin just lost the title after they put all the stock into him being their champion.
Not to mention, when we're talking about fighters coming out to promotion, I didn't want to talk about that, but Cyborg has called out PFL and Bellator over the course of the last year with the whole super fight. And you mentioned Reiner. We just talked about it last week, 2 weeks ago. Reiner absolutely crapped on one championship.
Yeah, no former UFC fighter is going to one after hearing that.
So here's the problem. No way. And this might be a bold take on my end, especially given that I didn't want to say anything about the segment. But, we're coming to a point, gentlemen. BKFC and boxing might be the number 2 of combat sports at this point.
It's very well possible. I mean, after we clear out whatever this situation is, it's very well possible we end up with BKFC or something like that. Or you could just consider like an LFA or Fury as a number 2. But the problem with that is then it's a feeder system. The number 2 being a feeder promotion is not great. It's like it is kind of like this, I guess you could say. Like the way the NFL, like it has the CFL, it's had other leagues come and go throughout the years, which is
But you don't have the difference. You don't have the CFL, UFL competing with the NFL during the NFL season.
No, but it would also be like the NFL, like if they owned the NCAA and that was like everything they had. You know what I mean? It would be pretty weird. Like, I don't know. Like,
and speaking of the feeder promotions, the problem is, let's say not all the Bellator fighters kept around or Bellator closed or whatnot. Then let's take an example of somebody like a Leandro Higo. Then maybe they go to an LFA or a Titan FC, which, good on LFA and Titan FC. That's what you do, and it's a shame for Leandro Higo because LFA and Titan FC are probably not going to pay as much as being on a big stage. But so that hurts them. But you know who else it hurts? It also hurts the guy who's rising up like 5-0, and now maybe he doesn't get as many opportunities to rise up because, oh, look, here comes all this star power coming down. And it concerns me because,
right, because if you don't get signed to the Contender Series, where do you go from there?
So that's the problem. And, running short on time, but going what we talked about before the show, guys, say what you will about Scott Coker. Corey Anderson praised Scott Coker all to hell during his remarks. Somebody, a fight critic, Fight Oracle, completely bashed Scott Coker and his handling of the Bellator as the promotion. But when you're seeing this and you're seeing what's going on with one championship, here's my main opinion. I'm concerned about the future of fighters at this point. And I know PFL has talked about being a fighter-friendly promotion, but I'm being honest here. I am genuinely concerned because, say what you will about Fight Oracle, but we're talking about going back in time. I'm fearing right now MMA is about to enter a point where it's going to be a consolidation, whether it's the PFL losing momentum or Bellator closing or one championship close. Like, that is not going to be good for a competitive market, especially when we're in the midst of, or just coming off the heels of, in one case, and then in another case, the UFC antitrust lawsuit.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's just a horrible look for the sport in general, everything that's happening. I just, like I said, just wish there was a number two that could really step up and just be consistent. I don't know. Doesn't need to be too much. I know it's not. I know it's easier said than done, of
Yeah.
course, but
All right, Pat. Thank you for so much for coming into this segment, tagging in.
of course. Thank you for having me.
All right. Now it's time for another controversy. And we gotta also be more beyond the facts on this one. It's the Conor McGregor lawsuit. I had a strange feeling inside me, Zan. Something was about to happen with this lawsuit. It was gonna happen this week. So I'm trying to bring up the story right now from ESPN with Brett Okamoto. But the base story here is that Conor McGregor, this was a civil lawsuit. This was not a criminal lawsuit. According, I forget the source, but apparently the reason it was not no criminal charges were pursued is because Ireland holds a very high standard when it comes to crimes of sexual assault. Crimes of the four-letter R word that I'm not going to say on here. Here's a story, though, from Brett Okamoto. A jury ruled in favor of a woman who accused UFC superstar Conor McGregor of sexually assaulting her in a hotel room in December 2018. The High Court of Dublin ordered McGregor to pay the complainant 240,000 euros, or around $257,000. I had the estimates here because most sources are going with the estimates. The jury had deliberated on the case for about a week. McGregor, who denied the accusations and said he had consensual sex with the accuser, is not currently facing any criminal charges. The woman, who has been identified as Nikita Hand, basically accused McGregor of forcing her onto a bed and choking her, making her fear for her life. Supposedly had bruising on her. Basically, the woman is basically saying that McGregor had a lot of anger stemming from the fight with Khabib 2 months prior. She alleges that McGregor threatened to kill her. She said she feared she would die and never see her daughter again. Here's a quote from her. He let me go, and I remember saying I was sorry, as I felt that I did something wrong, and I wanted to reassure him that I wouldn't tell anyone so he wouldn't hurt me again. Apparently, these two met at a Christmas party. McGregor again says everything is consensual, is calling the woman a liar, and basically said he was going to appeal the ruling.
Yeah, I mean, simply put, I don't really have any words. I'm just truly disappointed. If this is all true, I'm just so disappointed. I feel like I wasted it. If this all comes out to be true, I feel like I wasted almost a decade of my I guess of my following of the sport of MMA, and even giving him the time of day that I did. And it just really bums me out that it had to come to this. And I just feel bad for every person involved. And obviously my thoughts are, of course, with the victim. And it's just a dangerous and disgusting situation. And even though he put out the apology tweet at the time that we're recording this within the last couple of hours, I just feel so numb to this.
If this is all, McGregor is found civilly liable. If this goes to a higher court and it all comes out that, they still side with the woman. I mean, even if they don't, I mean, just the fact that this jury has found him liable. Then I'm not going to mince words, especially when you consider that we just talked about in the PFL story, you and Pat,
I was just
about
going
the
to say,
corporate end.
I was just going to say, do
I
you
think
feel
the
very-
UFC has to distance itself from Conor McGregor.
I was going to say, do you feel very similarly to what I just said too?
I don't know if I would say wasted years. I mean, we didn't know that it was eventually going to come to this, but I mean, ever since winning the championships, and was the double champ, he has just not been the same person. He achieved what nobody had achieved before, and this
And
is a
then
case of somebody letting success get to their head.
he fell totally off.
And, it feels harsh to say, given what I've said before about the UFC needs Conor McGregor more than Conor McGregor needs the UFC. But when you think about the TKO structure, Zan, and given that, and this is going to come back up, I think on the Empty the Bench Sports, the ETB Sports best of with myself and Nick Morganson from earlier this year, TKO outsid Vince McMahon, who founded the WWE based on his sexual based allegations. If WWE was able to do that, I think the UFC has to be able to distance itself from McGregor if all this rings true. And even if it doesn't, even if he's acquitted in a higher court and can come back down the line, at this point, I mean, it was already going to be in my mind, a long shot that he ever came back into the sport. But at least temporarily, you got to distance yourselves.
So my question is, because I fear it's going to happen, what are we going to say in 6 months when he has a fight announced again?
This is going to be a very harsh thing to say. And I know, this is going to be a very harsh thing to say. And I know we talk about, history of people and digging up dirt and such, but I wouldn't be surprised from a promotion that is run by a man who, on camera and willingly, struck his wife on New Year's Eve.
I think that's all you need to say.
That's all I need to say. It's harsh, but that's all I need to say. All right. 2 other stories here. Wait a minute. Is this a teaser?
I hope it is, man. I really do. So I saw this interview. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's with the Schmo. It's a newer interview. Jon Jones was asked, "Are you in negotiations to fight?" And he said, "Yeah." He didn't reveal who he was in negotiations to fight, but if we're putting the dots together, given Tom Aspinall made a video of him running in the streets of the UK, saying that he's also in negotiations, I think we can put 2 and 2 together that the fight that the world.
Not to mention, like I just referenced earlier, Alex Pereira still needs to make one more title defense. Magomed Ankalaev is owed a light heavyweight title shot.
So yeah.
So hopefully this goes into the direction that, Zan, I kind of teased before. Jones has to fight Aspinall, Pereira has to fight Ankalaev, and okay, you boys win your matches, you get the super fight.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go out and make a prediction. Are you ready for me to do so?
Okay.
All right, so I'm just going to say it. So I think the main event of UFC 313 is going to be Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev in March in Las Vegas. And I think the main event of International Fight Week is going to be between these two.
I could see that.
I'm going to go out on a limb and just say it. And then if the fights go the way people think they're going to go.
December of next year?
No, November, Madison Square Garden, Jones.
Oh. Don't tease me like that. Don't tease me like that.
Hey, if I have a crystal ball and this comes back to be true, I'm gonna need to be praised every day until the day of the fight. So that's my bold prediction.
Here's my question.
Okay.
Pereira wins his fight, but Aspinall wins his fight. Do you go Jones Aspinall rematch, or do you give Aspinall the mega fight?
Oh no, you got to do the Jones Aspinall. No, absolutely.
Okay, I threw it out there just to throw it out there.
No, you do the Jones Aspinall fight. You give people the rematch they want to see. It would be the biggest heavyweight rematch of all time if it were to happen. Yeah, that's the fight.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm just gonna say it. No disrespect to any of the other stories in MMA. To me, if this fight happened, Jones Aspinall, that's going to be the biggest story in MMA. If this fight and will this fight happen? That's going to be That's going to be the biggest story in the entire sport in 2025, bar none. And I would be very surprised if there's anything close. Maybe the second biggest story would be where the UFC goes in terms of TV rights. But in terms of literal fight news, this is the fight of all fights in any weight class. So
now I will throw one caveat into your 313, although this next one probably could serve as the co-main event, but yeah, you just never know. That leads to our last story. So Peter Yan, it was an excellent fight in Macau between he and Davison Figueiredo. I have to say, for UFC Macau having talent that, were more localized, we were Chinese based, given the location of the fight night card. Zain, that was probably one of the most entertaining fight night cards of the year.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I think staying up, having to do the 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. run was worth it.
Yeah, thankfully I didn't have to do that. I woke up in time for the main event to start. But to have 6 knockouts, to have six knockouts, 6 decisions, and 1 submission is a pretty crazy rate of fights, I would say.
And I mean, the decisions were also, for the most part, pretty good fights too. I mean, Jan Figueiredo, it was sweeping up the scorecards, but those two still delivered in terms of
it was
striking.
It was a great fight. Just in regards to the second part of this thing, it's a good idea. I like where Merab's head's at. He's got the poster up. He changes the date. I get it. It starts to, get the wheels in motion here. But let's be honest. The fight for Peter Yan that makes the most sense next is Sean O'Malley. Myself, yourself, everybody else included, thought that Peter Yan beat Sean O'Malley the first time they fought at UFC 280. The fight needs to be run back again. The fight that makes the most sense for the next fight at bantamweight it has to be Usman Nurmagomedov. I mean, he's done everything he's needed to do. He just beat Corey Sandhagen a couple months ago. He's cleaned out the entire division, undefeated. That's the fight you do. Then you worry about the Peter Yan, Sean O'Malley mess, and you go from there, because no matter what, between those 4 guys that I just said, any of those fights does very, very well. And I think 135, people want to complain. It's a stagnant division. Going into 2025, it's the furthest thing from it. So you have a lot of parity there. You got 4 guys there. You got a couple other guys waiting in the wings that I didn't mention. The division is in a very healthy place right now, in my opinion.
Absolutely. So, by the way, you got completely ahead of me. I was going to play the sound effect again. I feel like I got to add that to the sound effects. And anytime we bring up Umar, it's just got to play.
It's true. Very good point.
But yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I think you got to do Yan versus O'Malley next. Probably make that the co-main of one of these big pay-per-view cards. Hell,
that'll happen. I think you could even make it the co-main for January and get everybody excited to go into the
January. Make it for January, or make it for Sydney, or hell, actually, you have to consider that O'Malley is still recovering. He had the surgery that he has to treat. But I mean, Zain, if we got to wait a while for it, I think International Fight Week as a co-main event or as a feature fight on the main card, I smell money there.
Yeah, there's a lot of money there. And I think people, we need to start planning well in advance if you wanted to go to that one. So,
but I do agree. I think, no disrespect to Peter Yan, because I know he's going to want that win back against Merab Dvalishvili. They met at UFC Las Vegas. Yes, Las Vegas last year.
Yeah, at the Virgin Hotels.
Yeah. Merab completely, dominated that fight. Obviously ends up going on to beat Cejudo, beat O'Malley for the title. But, Umar is next. Plain and simple.
For sure.
Even though Merab doesn't like it, Umar is next.
100%.
All right. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. Again, subscribe to youtube.com/ETB Network. If you want to catch us on the road, make sure to check us out wherever you get your podcasts, Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, so much more. Again, shout out to our friends over at Playback. Next week, Day and time to be determined. We will have a UFC 310 fight study. And of course, we will have some more at the network NBA games coming your way. But yeah, Zain, next week, we're going to preview. We'll do our recaps for the PFL World Championships, but it's going to be a stacked show because we also have a preview for UFC 310.
Yeah, it's going to be a stacked show for sure. And given that we're going into the last pay-per-view of the year, it'd only be fair, just given where we are records wise, to trade some picks. But we will make sure that those are evenly distributed before we record episode 108.
Sam, speaking of, also next week, second to last episode of the season. So we're gonna do 2 more shows. We know that there is a very big boxing fight, heavyweight championship fight on December 21st. The plan right now is, even though we will not have a show December 17th, we will still put out something as a little preview for that fight. We may have some plans in the works for that fight. That's still to be determined. But then at that point, we're in best of mode, like just about almost every show here on the network.
That's correct. So thanks for sticking with us until the end. And until next week, we hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. We hope you enjoy the Friday festivities with the PFL. And we hope you are counting down the days to UFC 310 in Las Vegas like he and I are. And until then, we will see you guys soon. Have a good one.
Take care, everybody.